Hi, I'm Shannon Cyr, and I am the relationship coach for men. Today, we're going to be talking about emotionally, verbally abusive relationships. And so, the verbal abuse that we hear about in a relationship, we've all kind of heard about it at some point, right? But we don't really know exactly what that looks like or if it's something that we've really experienced, right? So when we try to define it or decide if we're actually in one, things become even less clear. And so I've been in one myself. And as a strong, driven, kind of type A sort of woman, this was a really hard thing to accept, and it was a really hard thing to recognize. I couldn't imagine how I could have come to be in a situation like that, much less really allow it. But there I was, right? And so, women are not the only ones who experience abusive relationships at all. Men do too. And you can imagine how difficult it is for them to be able to wrap their minds around that they would be in any kind of abusive relationship, right? Mainly just because that's not something that they identify with. But also because they don't really see a lot of the things that are happening as abuse. Men are often expected to be strong and stoic and just kind of, oh, suck it up, that kind of attitude and not really express a lot of emotion. So especially around something like, verbal abuse, and definitely when it's happening to them. And so I want to share a story about one of my clients. He and his wife would go to marriage counseling together every week, pretty much. And they had been doing this for 6 months or so. And when they were at the therapist's office, it felt like a safe environment. And so they would both kind of share their issues and their challenges and the things that were going on for them. They would both talk and listen, and it really seemed that these sessions went well each time they left. And he would leave the session and kind of feel like they had made some progress. And he said that, it seemed like they both really had a chance to be heard. And by all accounts, really, even the therapist, it looked as though they were both really, truly working hard on the marriage. And so, they get in the car to go home, and his wife really wouldn't say very much and really wouldn't talk, and he would keep trying to engage in conversation. And then she would just start pointing out everything that he did in the session that was wrong. She'd call him names, put him down, insult him, belittle him, tell him he was a horrible person, that he was a bad husband. She would blame him for everything that was wrong in her life and their life, and somehow it was always his fault. And she would do this through yelling the whole time. And that is, in fact, verbal abuse. And we would talk about this, and he'd say, well, I think she was just upset, or she had a bad day or was really stressed about her job. Sometimes, he would say that things had been challenging for a long time, and, he just wasn't sure that she just wasn't sure either. Right. And, he thought that maybe he did say something in that session that made her mad. And that was what kind of caused it. He'd start kind of second guessing himself and go back and think about everything that was said. And he'd been living that way for so long and had become so used to these interactions that he kind of got used to the way that they were. He kind of got used to the treatment, so to speak. He had built up a tolerance to the outbursts. And then as they escalated, he was just able to normalize them more and more and just kind of adjusted himself, right? And so the thing is that he is in a verbally abusive relationship. He just doesn't recognize it as abuse. And when we were talking, I asked him, I said, what if it wasn't words that she was kind of throwing at you? Let's say she was hitting you and throwing things at you. Would that be okay with you? And he said, no, of course it wouldn't be okay. We talked about that a little bit more, and he agreed that it was not okay if she was lashing out physically and wasn't able to control her anger and her emotions enough to be able to have an emotionally healthy conversation, right? And then I asked him, okay, I said, if that's the case, then why is it okay for her to be hitting you with words in that same way that she can't control? So think about it this way. If your son or your daughter was in a relationship that mirrored what yours looks and feels like, how would you feel about that? Would you want them to be in a relationship like that? Would you try to step in and say something? Probably so, right? So if it's not okay for your child, how can it be allowable treatment for you? What if it was a parent or a good friend or your brother or sister in a relationship like that? So now, you know, we all get into arguments, of course, right? But it's not okay to have that done to you. And it certainly isn't okay to have that done to you consistently. It just isn't okay when it's always like that. The yelling at you, calling you names, degrading you, having someone raise their voice to the point of where you really just want to shut down. That is verbal abuse, and it's not okay. Just like it's not okay if it's physical, it's not okay if it's verbal. Hopefully this is helpful for you to understand, you know, what a verbally abusive relationship can look like and whether or not what you're experiencing could be verbal abuse or maybe it's something else. If you want to know more about how you can step up for yourself in a verbally abusive relationship and how you can do things differently, I invite you to schedule a complimentary exploratory session with me. Let's see if we're a good fit to work together and start making change that you can feel good about. I hope you found this video helpful. And if you like what you hear, I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel. I come out with new content every week. All my best.